Back on my old channel in a video that is now gone because all of my old channel was wiped out by YouTube. But in one of the videos that I recorded on that old channel, I think it was called Esoteric, Orwell, and Huxley. And it was a consideration of the idea that when one looks at these books, these most famous examples of dystopian nightmare scenarios, but of very different describing a very different kind of society in both cases. In Brave New World by Huxley, the dystopia is just because men and women have been trained to just be to just follow sensation and not yearn for higher aspirations, but just to drug themselves all the time and have sex a lot with promiscuous sex from the very start of their lives, and that's just the way that humanity is now treated. It's just all about hedonism. It's all about pleasure. There's nothing about sacrificing. There's nothing about attempting to ascend to a better state than one is in before. There's nothing about improving oneself or being improved spiritually. There's no notion of man as a child of God, as created in the image and likeness of God. All of that has been chucked by the rulers of the dystopia that is described in Brave New World. And then you have Orwell, of course, the other end of the spectrum, where it's a nightmare scenario where everyone is fearful all the time, and they're being surveilled every minute of every day, no matter where they are, by Big Brother and his minions, and so they just have to do their part to serve the all powerful state, and they eventually, of course, slip up in one way or another because the state's always changing. We're at war with East Asia, and then we're at war with Oceania. No, it's Oceania is the country, but they're at war with East Asia, or they're at war with the other block. There's like 3 blocks that exist across the world, and sometimes the war is with one, sometimes it's with the other, and you instantly send things down the memory hole if it's no longer valid. If the truth can change, whatever the party says is true, and the party can change day by day, and so the party can tell you one thing one day and then totally contradict itself the next day, and you just have to say, long live the party, long live Big Brother, or else they'll torture you and murder you and stuff like that. So it's a bleaker dystopia than Huxley's dystopia, but nevertheless, both are famous depictions of human dystopia, where there is no more liberty. There is no more notion of as an exalted being. Man, in either case, either man is just a cog in the machine to be used and then thrown away. Well, that's really the case in both dystopias as they are described. But in one dystopia, the man is used and then thrown away ultimately, but along the way he's just given these distractions, which are constant pleasures and things that keep his head down and keep him basically in an animalistic condition. And in the other case, it's just intense fear and just a surveillance state that, well, I was going to say, makes our own surveillance state look like the Boy Scouts or something. But unfortunately, I don't think we can really say that anymore. I don't. I think the surveillance state that we are in right now is still has reached some near dystopian levels, and I believe we are being watched all the time, whether we're told that we are or not. That's a whole another question. But anyway, I began this whole discussion about Orwell and Huxley, and the idea of esoteric reading of both of these novels. The exoteric reading of 1984 and Brave New World is the reading wherein one says these are cautionary tales. These are tales these are books that are written to warn the reader about what the future might hold if certain current trends continue and predominate, and the worst of all possible outcomes, the darkest timeline, should unfold. This is what we are going to have. These are the societies that we are going to be left with. Orwell himself, published 1984 in 1948, and the whole idea of inverting the two numbers there was, to say, this is the mirror of the world that we're already living in. That was sort of his little fancy literary trope that he did with that number switch. But then one wonders if one is of a suitably paranoid bent, and I think paranoia is completely justified in many situations. One is if you're not paranoid, you're not paying attention. One also wonders if these books were written perhaps to be read esoterically by our rulers, by the powers that shouldn't be, the ones who rule us. That if these were intentionally written, or even if they were unintentionally written for that purpose, if Huxley and Orwell actually had good intentions behind the writing of these works, but nevertheless they were seized upon and used in this way, and if they were sort of seen in some ways as blueprints, or maybe maybe that was the plan from the start. It's easier, I think I mentioned this in my prior video, it's easier to believe about a character like Aldous Huxley, who is a member of the ruling class, steeped in privilege, and his one of his relatives was one of the big pushers of Darwinism, which was everybody, if you're an enlightened member of the 19th century, you got to believe in Darwinism, and this prior Huxley was Darwin's bulldog. Darwinism was just one form of, just the godless materialist, just logical positivist. There's nothing beyond what we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, and essentially it's nihilistic, even though it tells us to do things. It assumes a moralistic demeanor, but really on no grounds whatsoever, because it says there is nothing beyond this world. There's no God. There's no moral order. Everything, whatever morality exists is just, like Thrasymachus says in Plato's Republic, is just what's in the interest of the stronger. Anyhow, it's easier to see how a character like Aldous Huxley might have written Brave New World with, in some sly kind of way, where he intended it to masquerade as a cautionary tale, but it was really a blueprint for how we're going to change, how they're going to change humanity to suit their own ends. Now, I would say that it's harder to talk about 1984 in that way, simply because Orwell, to me, comes across as a man of great integrity. From what I know of him, of course, we can never fully know anybody else, so I might be wrong on that point. But Orwell, number one, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of elite connections, and he seemed to live a life where he was out there, sort of trying to live by his ideals, even if he very frequently failed and was confounded by them. He was employed as a policeman in Burma at a time when he hated English imperialism and wanted it to cease, but he was also a very honest writer, so he wrote about how he hated the Burmese and the way that they would treat him as a policeman. This is as a symbol of English authority, and this is in his famous essay "Shooting an Elephant," or is it "Killing an Elephant"? It's one or the other, which is worth reading. I think you can find it for free. A great short story or memoir, I guess. And he went down to fight for who he thought were the good guys in the Spanish Civil War, to fight against the fascists, and fight for the socialists, improve the state of the working class. But he saw firsthand when he was stationed in Spain and in Catalonia, he saw how the Stalinists were infiltrating everything and basically stifling and eliminating and purging independent thought, which eventually meant Orwell himself. But he saw how Trotskyite factions and just non-communist factions, how they were all basically it became how it was more of a priority for the Soviet communists, the Stalinists. It became more of a priority for them to purge their own side than to win the war. And of course, they didn't win that war. That was a war that was won by Franco and the right. And Orwell largely blamed the Soviets for how things turned out, because they had no interest in playing ball. For them, it was just infiltrate everywhere with our own people and do our own thing. And then, it was a sort of, the party line changes from one day to another. This is something that he picked up on and wrote about in 1984. So by the end of his life, and I say the end of his life, I think he was like late 30s, early 40s. He didn't live very long, but he was quite disillusioned with Soviet communism, but still had some kind of hope for the betterment of the working man. Still, when he wrote 1984, it seems like a very bleak. It is a very bleak book, and it seems like a book that pretty much, closes the door on hope. You want to talk about a black pill? 1984 is a very black-pilled novel. Now, it's a novel of great insight, and there's a lot of interesting things about it. If you haven't read it, the whole idea of newspeak, how it came about, and how newspeak is meant to function in a way that prevents people from thinking. Orwell was very much a stickler for the English, for using precise English language. He was a lover of language. Politics in the English Language, another great essay that he wrote. So all these things, all of this is to say, it's much harder to see Orwell as something that was, where he wrote 1984 as a blueprint for the bad guys, because it's harder to see Orwell himself as being allied with the bad guys. It's easier to see Huxley just because of his family connections and his extensive elite connections. So that's my take on esoteric Orwell and esoteric, or the notion of esoteric Orwell and Huxley. And I think I'm going to divide this video into two parts now, because what I really wanted to talk about was I wanted to make some connections to to some of the famous psychological experiments of recent years. The Stanley Milgram experiment, the Stanford experiment are the two that I want to refer to the most. But there have been plenty of other ones. Some of them, a lot of them, being of dubious morality as far as what they put people through, as far as the information they withheld from their test subjects, and but nevertheless, what was learned through them, what it might have all been for, what might have all been about. So I will cover that in my next video. Thanks for watching.